Tonight we'll watch zyxon from Sweden, who's playing mariorton of Mexico. zyxon being the clear rating favorite by a couple of 100 points, but mariorton is a very experienced player with tens of thousands of games under his belt. So I think we'll see some exciting games here. I see that zyxon is online. I think mariorton was online just a little while ago. So hopefully we'll see the match start pretty soon. Let me just adjust the camera here. So I'm gonna check if anyone knows anything about when the game starts. Oh, the players are seated. So zyxon is playing white in the first game. As you can see, zyxon has a 7-2 lead in their games before the match. And I expect quite a big winning margin, maybe a 7-3 or 8-2 in favor of zyxon. zyxon is hovering around 50% in the Candidates tournament. And mariorton being one of the tail enders. zyxon usually prefers to play e4. Let's see if mariorton plays this gambit style, or if he recaptures on d5. This is slightly odd because mariorton is thinking in the opening. Doesn't look very prepared, this. So a quick queen trade. White is slightly ahead in the development, but no danger here for black, who looks solid. So I would say modest success here for the black opening strategy, actually. Well, a very natural move here would be simply to play bishop g4 before you decide where to put your e-pawn. I don't quite like closing this diagonal for the bishop. I don't see a need for it. Made more sense even to play e5 instead. So white is putting the question to this knight where to go. Well, you could go either way here, d5 or g4. So this is inviting white to take when the knight would be pinned here on c3. Hi there, okay. Do you want to join the stream? Do we have anyone else watching here? There are a few persons. So this knight looking good here, threatening the queen, but black actually gave the queen for a piece here and a pawn on d4 and some initiative. But this queen drop protects everything and hits knight on d4. Black protecting the knight on d4 indirectly by threatening to take on f3 and forking king and queen if white should take on d4. White trying to hang on to his extra material. And notice that you cannot take on e2 because of queen at d8 mate. Well, I suppose mariorton didn't notice because he got mated in 1. And actually I think the position in the end was, well, sort of unclear. Let's see what the computer says. Yeah, knight at h4. Another knight hitting f3 was what I expected. Black is actually better here. One suggestion was to play here, but yeah, that looks good. Probably the best for white here is actually to drop the queen here and start taking some knights. So, back to the game. Let me just follow zyxon. mariorton playing kingside fianchetto. And zyxon playing the early bishop g4, not taking on f3 here. Instead preparing some action with the h-pawn. And I'm wondering if g5 is the move here. mariorton has played quite quickly. Black needs to be careful about the g6 square though. Now once again maybe g5 is a move. Black is overprotecting the g6 square. But now bishop b7 looks difficult to meet. So black decides just to give up the rook here on a8. Admittedly, it took a while for white to grab the rook here, but black doesn't have enough compensation here for a whole rook. But black goes on the offensive and hopes for the best. Probably white should take here and take on c6. Looks like black actually has some compensation now. Yeah, you could take on h3 and pawn at g4 maybe, or just bring the bishop home and start pounding on the dark squares, bringing the king out. Possibly just check here, maybe play rook Knight d7. Black would like to have a knight here. Something other than those pawns he has in hand. So maybe pawn e3 here. Oh, I thought pawn e3 and then just deflect the king from g2. But maybe he has enough here around the king. Although once the queen swung over to g7, white is threatening to take here on d8, and it's quite a nasty threat. So I don't think black has enough here. I'm curious, maybe that there was something here a couple of moves back. Maybe pawn at e3 instead here, with a lot of shelter around the black king. Okay, because this isn't enough. Så, ska vi se. Aha, okay. Nice tip there. Okay, thank you so much. And I don't like the way white neglected to take on d8, because take the knight. The knight is useful in hand, and it also sucks the black king closer to the white forces. White could probably play queen b8. So now actually black might still have a few tricks up his sleeve. Oh, the golden days of fix. Those were the days. So is black hoping to sack his queen here? A very weird position here. So actually threatening bishop at f4 mate. But can black get out of the checks here? In fact, any check here on the long diagonal would be mate in a few. Also, a knight check here on c4 would be killing. Oh, that old song. Those were the days, my friend, I thought they'd never end. Let's see if mariorton can find a way to end this. It sure looks like he has some sort of mate here. He has to do it all with check, though. Can he? But now he only has... Why did he waste his bishop? I don't get it. Oh, he's about to get mated here. Yeah, bishop at e3 is... And rook e1 mate. He cannot afford to do it like this. And let's try that nifty little trick. Wait, it works. So obviously Black has some compensation here. I was thinking pawn at e3 maybe, but it's still slow. But as you can see, white should have taken on d8, not allowing the black king to escape. And now actually queen takes g3 is a forced mate. That would have been a true beauty. And still queen takes g3 here. And apparently, how is this? I was thinking white should have something here. And indeed, this is better for white. Or at least I thought so. But where did he go wrong? He should have taken on e5 here. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. After bishop at h6, he just ran out of checks. Okay. So I want to follow zyxon. I don't think there's a quick way of doing it. I'll do it like this. So what happened in the opening? Still a d5 we saw before, but no early queen trade now. Instead, white is just making use of his extra space and better development. Winning a pawn here, threatening b7. You might even consider taking on c6 here maybe, and play bishop at b7, but this is also promising. Okay, so the black king had to move, and white has the initiative for sure, threatening to take on f6. Oh, did white miss something after bishop at h6? Maybe I was too quick to dismiss the white attack there. So black missed a little tactical threat here. White simply took on g4. He's going to fork on f6 and regain his queen, and black will have problems with his king. Although bishop takes, knight takes here, and king d8. It looks a bit dangerous around the white king as well. But was really c8 the best square there? I'm not sure. Because with the king on c8 it cannot really protect itself. You have stuff like queen e8 and simply taking on e4. That would have been prevented by keeping the king on d8 instead. On the other hand, you then had queen f6 and take on h8, but was there something? No, probably. Yeah. Then you had knight h3. So, yeah. Keeping the king at d8 seemed better. And here you might actually consider taking on g4 and then playing bishop f5. Or even pawn d7. Maybe pawn d7 first was even stronger. Yeah, pawn d7 made a lot of sense. And still pawn d7 looks very strong, drawing the king out to a very unsafe spot. And And a couple of checks before you grab the rook. You could even play pawn f6 if you would like to, but the e7 square is really unsafe. So knight g8. Knight g8 threatening e7. And oh, this is mate in 2, sorry. Even better, closing the exit on d6. 3-0 zyxon. And that looks simple enough. So here you got the chance to quickly take on f3, and he's going after the d4 pawn here. Mariorton is prepared, but this also is eyeing the g3 pawn, which in combination with this h pawn makes the black setup quite impressive. So some tactics here for black, because if you take twice here on e4, the bishop on h3 will be hanging. And it just feels like a self-playing piano, the black attack here. Threatening f4, threatening h3, black is getting his material back. He could simply take on f4, although that would open the e file. And another way of doing it would be to play pawn at e4. So black prefers to give his rook rather than... But I'm not sure about this, because black is a bit weak here. It's usually useful to just put the rook on the board. Gives some extra possibilities. Sometimes you might take on h6, but simply having a pin here is just annoying for black. And since he has a pawn in hand, trading that queen for the rook might be very useful for black. So he has a strong threat here. Pawn here, rook here on g1, and then rinse and repeat. Another pawn and another rook. So the only clear way of doing something here against this threat is maybe g3, but you could also take here and then put something on g3. Doesn't quite look as it's enough compensation here for black, but he has some interesting attacking possibilities. Probably has some confidence leading 3-0. And actually material-wise it's quite even. Black has a piece and a couple of pawns for the queen. So he doesn't need to worry a whole lot. Now maybe pawn f4. Yeah. Trying to get a grip on the g3 square. And you don't want to play knight g6, I think, because of bishop takes d8. This knight seems like an important defender. keeping an eye on all sorts of important squares. So do you want to take here? But then black can unleash an attack on g3. So maybe it's dangerous to take on d8. It does seem a bit slow. So what can you do here? Do you do something brutal like take on d5, or I just don't see it for white here. So what is happening here? So this queen offers a lot of protection here for white, and also puts pressure on e6. Blackjack just trying to put his pieces on the board now, kicking this queen. White decides to give up the queen. And maybe he has a chance here. Threatening possibly to put a pawn on c6. But it doesn't have a great follow-up. Mariorton down to its last 6-7 seconds. Plenty of options here for black, but he has to be a bit careful because he cannot put heavies on the board, maybe because of the pawn c6, possible checks here on the 7th rank. But what happened here? Mariorton simply overstepped the time limit, but he probably had a bad position anyway. And we see the same early queen trade as we did in an earlier game, but this time white took with the bishop, provoking a very passive pawn drop here on c6, and I don't like this pawn drop at all. Avoid that kind of move. So a little fork here. But bear in mind that black has spent a lot of time in the opening. So I'm not sure if this is a pseudo-sacrifice, because maybe the pin won't stay here until white gets the chance to take on f6. Maybe the d4 move by white was premature because of queen g4. But with the king on f7, white always has some compensation here. So you could probably, could you take on f6? No, because of take and take. And what about knight g4 now? Does white have compensation here? Probably queen at f5. I think black should have taken the chance to put a piece on the board. Because he's risking ending up with too many pieces in hand and not enough pieces on the board here. This is looking a bit passive, I think. Although if given the chance, he can put a bishop maybe here somewhere. He's decided just to play it passively, trying to keep everything under control. He is a whole piece up. So maybe objectively this is not good for white, but I think black is handling this too passively. So taking twice here on e6, the pawn on b5, b7 will be hanging. White is of course threatening to take on c7. Maybe white should take the opportunity simply to castle. I'm not sure how much the material deficit means in this position, because the white forces are much more active and the black forces are very, very passive. So white has some sort of compensation here. So this looks like something I could play against the computer, where I just grab material and all of a sudden I'm in a bad spot anyway because the computer is so much more active. All the white pieces that are remaining are useful. So it might be a piece and a pawn down here, but I'm still not sure how bad this is for white. Well, now we got a queen. So do you go bishop d5, recapture with the rook, and you're prepared to maybe take on e5 and give up your queen for a couple of light pieces? Instead he decides to give up his queen immediately. With some nasty threats here against the black king position. Look at all those passive pieces. I'm wondering how the computer assesses this. So watch out so you don't go to the corner because of knight at g3. f2 is the safer spot. And given the chance, white will simply pick up the knight on e2. So you need to do something here, maybe take here and take on e2. White is probably worse there, but this does keep the initiative for white a little bit. Black trying to protect everything here. White heading back home to safety. Look out for e2. Pawn at e2 would be devastating. And mariorton played a couple of quick and possibly very bad moves there. He's about to get smothered here soon, I think. Look at how passive black is. Watch out for sacrifices. So pawn here. And that just looked very, very bad for black. Why on earth did he put the piece there? Because you have the discovered check, you have stuff landing on e6, you have... Oh, this is looking very bad. And indeed it's mate. Wow. You can't afford to play like this. Some poor defensive move there by mariorton when he had the upper hand. So let's see how zyxon plays this. A quick e4 by white, but that e4 move gave black the pawn he needs for his kingside campaign here with h5 and sacrifice on h3. So a very natural attack here by black, who has actually managed to win some material. So this is a nifty move of inviting a queen trade for h2. And if white takes here, he opens up the h-file voluntarily. And this just looks very strong for black. d4 is hanging, unless white takes on f2, of course. So black is just trying to open up the position now in his favor. He gave up a piece for a little while there, but he's immediately regaining the material, and he has an ongoing attack here. And gaining that bishop for g3 probably will most likely hurt white. Oh, black chose to put it on d4 instead. white wisely decides to protect it with a bishop rather than a pawn, because this bishop covers f2, which is probably important. Threatening h3 here, and also threatening rook at g2, so white covers both threats. But also threatening the pawn on d5 here. You could take on h3. So a lot of moves here for black. I wonder if you simply go here just to allow the h pawn to advance. And that little check hurts. Notice that black didn't stop for taking that bishop, because the bishop here on c1 is blocking the rook, so checking now on g1 is much stronger. It's actually made in 3 moves here. Okay. So it's 6-0 in favor of zyxon. Maybe looking to check on b5 again. Not repeating the pawn at c6 line we saw before. But this still looks a bit passive for black. But he has this pawn fork idea with a queen. Here it comes in another shape than before. I'll go for this pawn, because if the bishop takes, you can take the rook. You will take the rook for sure, and then rook at g1. And this is looking good for black, I think. A lot of easy moves there for black. Probably bishop here, and if a pawn blocks, you have knight at h4. So this didn't turn out so well for black. For white, sorry. So probably just knight f3. Knight f3 would have threatened the pawn on h2 and also threatened on the queen on e1. So look out here on d8. Don't get mated there again, mariorton. A simple way of defending would be to play bishop t7. But what is this? You still have the mate here. Okay. So he picked up the bishop on g5. Well, that looks strong. Not a very dangerous fork here, because the knight on h5 is more or less taboo because of rook at h6. So simply defend the knight on g5, I'd say. Yeah, a little tactical trick here. Rook at h3, because if you take with the pawn, you have knight f3 check, picking up the queen. Rook h3 looks very strong. And I have a feeling that mariorton senses that there is something in the position, but he didn't quite find it. But simply defending the knight looks strong as well. Has a lot of stuff for the queen he gave up. All the 4 bishops, for instance. And then he has 2 minor pieces and a rook, which is more than ample compensation for a queen. And as I said, if white takes here, you have rook at h6. But probably it's the best chance for white anyway. He has to do something with his queens. So taking here is a bad idea because of rook at g2. And I don't see any attacking ideas for white here. Actually, it's looking rather hopeless for white, I'm sorry to say. But zyxon won't go down without a fight. So I'm trying to deflect this bishop, but I would probably just take with the king instead. Because f7 is protected. And why is mariorton thinking so much when he has a way better position than white has? So preparing some nasty check here on f6. Can you take? Because knight check here, you go to h1. And black doesn't even have a threat here, does he? Oh, he prepared that. So he has a check on f3. Can you find some way to get an attack here for white? Maybe rook d3 just to cover h3 and maybe threaten to take on d7 again. Well, that white attack is just a bluff. Threatening g2. Also threatening the knight here on h5. And it's soon over. But black will need to finish this, and look out here on d7 now. What has mariorton done? This is a crazy game. 50 moves and it's mate on f4. No. No, 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 no. Just take with the king. Okay? Just take with the king and you're safe. But did he miss something here? Rook to g8 check. Yeah, rook to g8 and then simply take on g7. It's mate in 2 here. So he got a bit desperate taking here on f5, but he got immediately rewarded by that blunder and knight f4. Yeah. So let's follow zyxon here. And what do we have here? This is different. Knight g5. Haven't seen this before, but it looks prepared. An early sacrifice on f7. And white gave up a piece for, well, I'm tempted to say nothing. Because who is attacking here? Is white attacking or is actually black attacking here? And now we can simply take on g4, open up the h file. This is looking so dangerous for black. But now maybe knight at g5 comes with some more sting in it. Although you have king e7. And if this guy goes, there's a mate on g3 with a knight. And the king looks like it has a safe route to c8. So probably picking up the knight here, but what about taking on g2? There's a pawn here waiting for g2. And if knight check comes here, you can go to c8 rather than c7, which would allow the taking on e6 with check. Not so easy to defend here for white. Well, I'm guessing take the pawn for g2. But then again, white could put his pawn on g2 maybe. So instead he picks up a pawn with check. That is probably much better. So strong threat here on h1, rook h1 mate. c8 looks like a safe square. Probably have to take with the queen here so you get the exit, but then you put the rook on f1 instead. It's mate in 2. So 8-0 zyxon. Impressive match win here by zyxon. And will he win all 10 games? And as I said before, I don't like this black idea at all. It's just too passive. Look, white is just putting his bishop back in the garage just to avoid the forks by the black queen. And maybe white can afford to spend the tempo here just to provoke this passive pawn drop. Because the white pawn structure is much more aggressive here than the black one is. So this is a nice active spot for the knight. Well, I suppose you could just retreat with the queen. Seems like a nice little edge here for white. Both white's bishops are very active, whereas that black bishop is hidden behind a wall of pawns. And having the queen here on the semi-open e file always is, it provides white with some attacking prospects. So rather than taking here, allowing the black bishop to develop with tempo, white puts its queen on e2. It is blocking the view of this bishop though. But it has some interesting prospects. But instead of, I mean, if you take knight d4 here, you could go to c4. Or just fall back to d1 if black drops a knight here. So, he's the master of queen forks here. But maybe this will boomerang. Because now you can start kicking the queen maybe a little bit. White give up a piece. And white is enjoying some initiative here. Although it's not clear how strong the compensation is. It's not enough, I'd say. Black looks very solid. And white tries to chase the black queen, so it loses the protection of the knight here on f5. So now both kings have moved a little bit. The material balance is restored. Keeping an eye on f7. And this bishop needs to keep an eye around the white king so the black queen doesn't land on d3. So maybe some sort of delayed castling here by white. Do you put the king over here or over here? I don't know. Probably over on the queen side somewhere, somehow. White is taking the opportunity here to push around the black pieces. And actually white is winning some material here. Should it simply take on b5? Yeah, probably. a7 is hanging. Yeah, put those knights on the board. He forked the queen and the knight on e6, and now black is really groggy. Can you take on g6? Bishop at f7, knight at e5. And queen e4, and it's 9-0. So, mariorton is just getting outplayed here. And it's the 10th and final game. And white is waiting to decide where to put his king. Now he ran out of moves. And this just looked like a very neat shuffle here, bringing the bishop back and the knight forward, and the knight had to retreat to f3, and now you just punch a hole in the white position, probably pawn e4. With a lot of pressure. If the knight moves, you can maybe follow up with queen f6 check. And already the white position is looking second best. So this clears the g3 square. Now white is threatening to just take on g5 and put a knight on g3. And I don't see a way to defend against this threat. White has a knight in hand, but no way to cover g3. Other than placing the knight on g3. But that would just be horrible. So this is just a misery for white. Mariorton thinking a lot here. Or did he fall asleep? Taking an e4 won't help him much. It cost him a piece. And more than a minute on the clock. And a lot of threats here, threatening the queen, threatening to take here and take here. Too many threats. Maybe take on d4, because you threaten to check on g1. And if white takes care of that threat, you can keep on taking on d2 with the mating threat on e1. So black is trading a rook for d1 and its mate. Congratulations, zyxon, who got a perfect score, winning 10-0 against mariorton. Let me see if I can raid someone. Hang on. Congratulations. Is someone awake? Hikaru is awake. He needs some extra viewers. Hang on. Let's raid Hikaru. And thanks for watching, guys. Have a nice evening, and see you on Saturday when it's Katask versus Jan Lee.